And welcome to the Grindhouse. I'm JC, the host, and tonight we don't do this a lot unless I'm really up to bitching about something in the gaming industry, but tonight's actually a very positive note. We're here with a bunch of other gamers who actually do world building, so authors and game designers and GMs and such. And going to talk about the Gygax 75 challenge, which we'll get into in a few minutes. We'll also talk about a role-playing game called Zaibatsu, which definitely I have been very intrigued by. And for some reason, I feel like I'm dressed like Mr. Rogers tonight. I got this sweater and this button-up shirt, which is not
A
usually.
beautiful day in the neighborhood.
Well, I'm not wearing slippers, so I guess that's kind of a plus. But anyway, I'm JC. I'm the host. To give you a little bit of background on myself and why I'm kind of excited about this challenge is we actually I think Pat has joined us. All right, so we actually have a late comer, but Pat, good of you to
Yo,
make.
what's up?
Hey, what's up? We're just kind of starting introductions, just rolling off. So you're on stream, so we will get to introductions in a moment. But just kind of going over credentials here. So myself, was a freelance game designer. I now work for Solarian Games, so I've designed the system for Top Secret New World Order. I've also written Tales from the Fallen Empire for DCC and a bunch of other things. I think the last recent odd thing that I had written was for the Gore RPG by Postmortem Studios. I did a module that didn't even have my name on it, which is really weird, but at least I could smile and go, yes, I wrote that, called Cat's Paw. So that's it. So that's it with me. I'm going to go around the circle here in the order that people are showing up on my screen. So Terry, why don't you tell us about yourself and give us a bit of an introduction? Or I guess
Sure.
that's the same thing.
I'm Terry Mixon, and I'm a science fiction author of about roughly 40 novels. And I'm a longtime gamer. Started gaming in the Army back in the 80s. Did most of my game mastering back in that day. And I moved most of my world building and character development over into my writing. And I've only recently gotten back into playing again. So that's where I am. Oh, I worked at NASA for 16 years. So that's got to count for something.
Wow.
Absolutely. All right, Mike.
Hi, my name is Mike, and just a gaming enthusiast. Always loved gaming. Started in the early 80s and really haven't stopped. Really used gaming as a source for my creative outlet, and just really excited to participate and join.
All right, awesome. Catherine.
I'm Catherine. On Twitter, I'm Epi or Epiphany. I work for Eldritch Osiris Games. We're like a third-party Pathfinder 2nd Edition company. I've been in D&D since I was 7, which was only in like 2002, as I am a lot younger than you guys. And yeah, I do like short stories and stuff like that. Nothing too crazy.
All right, awesome. And last but not least is Pat. Pat, you want to give yourself an introduction?
Yeah, my name is Pat O'Sullivan. I am a filmmaker and podcaster. I have a couple short films that are available now on the streaming on the Troma Now app. So check them out there. And then podcast, I do a weekly paranormal occult conspiracy show called On Wednesdays We Talk Weird. And gaming wise, I'm an avid gamer. I just ran a game at GaryCon about a week and a half ago, and I am looking forward to running. I did a 5e Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles homebrew thing at GaryCon, and then at Gamehole in October, I'm hoping to do a Tomb of Horrors Home Alone mashup, the Tomb of Kevin McAllister. And yeah, I like games. I've gamed with JC, and nice to meet all you guys.
All right, well, it was a pleasure. Yeah, wow. Home Alone and Tomb of Horrors. That just sounds really freaking
There's traps,
cool.
right? There's traps in both, so that's just, you know.
I don't know if it's me, but Catherine and Pat, your video isn't moving. It's just still images.
Oh, that's weird.
I'm moving on mine. Catherine's not moving on mine, though.
I'm moving on mine. Pat's not moving on mine.
It's all very strange.
I wonder if it's moving on YouTube or not.
I'm actually
I'll
an
check
AI,
YouTube. Yeah, on YouTube I'm frozen.
artificial intelligence.
Yeah, I just knew it.
Interesting.
Let me try and restart my camera, maybe.
All right, let's see if that works. Because I know Mike and Terry are actually moving, so I don't feel it's an internet problem. So we'll see. And nope.
Still frozen.
At least you're frozen in a decent.
Yeah,
Sure.
great
Yeah.
frozen
Image.
pictures. I've seen plenty of terrible pictures where people get the video freeze. You're like, oh, that's awkward.
At least it's flattering.
Yeah, so hopefully it'll work itself out, and we'll see if we can't get it to go. But let's jump into the first topic. So I was mentioning that we're here tonight talking about the Gygax 75 challenge. So this was actually written by Ray Otis, and you can find this on itch.io if you're interested in picking it up. It's free or a donation. Honestly, I downloaded it for free, but I did go back and give a donation afterwards because it is such awesome material. But this is all based on one of Gary Gygax's articles from April of 1975 in a thing called Europa magazine. And he only has part 2 listed because I think that was the only part of this article he could find. But Gary goes into some really, really deep things about world building and game design, which always kind of blows my mind that, and sure, Gary was a very flawed individual. However, reading the first edition AD&D Dungeon Master's Guide is an amazing experience. Like, honestly, sure, there's a lot of high Gygaxian to get through, and at some point you're just kind of going, Gary, what are you smoking? But a lot of the stuff that he wrote was really kind of, I'll call it gamer deep, as it were. And what Ray has done is he's actually broken up Gary's Gary actually broke up his article into 5 different points about world design, and Ray did the same thing, but in that also gave exercises in which to go ahead and flesh out these ideas. So I guess I just kind of want to go around, and so for myself, I'm actually working on a new module for Dungeon Crawl Classics that is going to be detailing a kind of a partial world setting. And one of the things that I noticed, because it's already written, it's already edited, but when I look back at it, I'm just like, I mentioned like this main keep, and I mentioned like a city that's miles and miles of leagues and leagues away, I should say, but I haven't really fleshed out anything in between other than, yeah, it's a borderland area, and there's tons of trees, and there's a forest, and there's orcs that live in this forest. So obviously I kind of want to go back and revisit that. So that's kind of my circle of why I'm kind of very interested in doing this exercise with everybody, and also doing some world building. Terry, how about you?
I haven't built a role-playing game world in 40 years. It has been a while. I've slept since then. But when I was doing it, I focused a lot on mainly the area that they were working in. And it was always, we gamed every weekend, all weekend long. It was in the Army. People it was day after day of all day gaming when the weekend arrived. It was racing to stay one step ahead of where the players were running. There was not a whole lot of forethought. There was make it up on the fly.
All right. Wow. Okay. Well, 40 years, that's some time. So hopefully get those creative juices flowing again. Now, Mike, I actually asked you purposely to join us because in the last conversation at our last gaming session, you had mentioned that you were starting some world building. So you want to tell us a little bit about what you're kind of thinking?
Sure. So I've had a lot of ideas over the years that have just kind of been rattling around in my head. And it just, everything kind of came together, and I've just decided to put everything down on paper because why not? I wanted to see what it looked like when it was actually on the canvas instead of just bouncing around in my head. And it's been a learning experience, and it's been actually challenging and creative all at the same time. But yeah, so far I've enjoyed it. I've had a lot of fun with it.
All right, great. Catherine, now I know you're already like into week one, but what kind of sparked you to do it? And do you have any idea of what you want to do with this world once you have it kind of fleshed out?
Yeah, so the reason why I kind of jumped on it was because it gave me an excuse to flesh out and work on a campaign and setting idea that I had for a while, which is one that is set in an MMO, like a massively multiplayer online game. Um, and I've always wanted to make it, especially with like fourth edition Dungeons and Dragons being kind of perfect for that. In like most ways, I've still had to like adjust some things, but yeah, it's definitely something that I've wanted to do, and now I finally have the opportunity to do it. I'm using like Dot Hack as a pretty large inspiration for that because I love that series. And yeah.
All right, awesome. And Pat, I know I brought you on, but I know that you also do well. Actually, now that you've impressed me with Home Alone and Tomb of Horrors, like, are you planning on doing any world building or any campaigns that this might come in handy?
Well, I do. I run a monthly game at a bar by my house that has been mix mash of all different kinds of stuff. I most recently incorporated a lot of Spelljammer stuff because that just came out. Although I've always been fascinated by the setting, so yeah, I'm not involved in this the 75-day thing, but I do NaNoWriMo every year, almost every year, National Novel Writing Month, which is like where you challenge yourself to write 50,000 words over the course of November. And I got to say, I think that another thing I do is the 48-hour film project, where you try to make a 7-minute movie over the course of a weekend. So I think that these exercises are really good for creative people because sometimes we need the structure of a challenge like this to put the blinders on and really focus.
Definitely.
Yeah, we could do this stuff on our own at any time, right? But having just that little bit of structure, saying, okay, we're going to do it from this day to this day, and you're going to try to get this much done every day. That is the motivation that sometimes you need, just to literally sit down and spend an hour or two a day putting pen to paper and just getting stuff out there. And you might not use everything that you write, but just the act of writing every day like this, I think, is definitely a positive thing.
Deadlines work for a reason.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
All right, awesome. So I'm actually going to try to hide the video and then bring it back. Let's see if this does anything so boom, and show on stream. All right,
Looks like his video is moving now. Well, it's not X'd. Maybe he can move. He looks like he's breathing. Oh, no, he's gone. She's moving.
Yay.
And now there's nothing for Pat.
Yeah, Pat kind of became a ghost.
And she froze again. I can see a little X that appears over the bandwidth marker, like the strength marker. So it looks like Catherine is frozen again.
Yeah, but you can still hear us though, correct?
Oh yeah, I can hear you guys.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we'll just Pat will be a ghost at least until the video returns.
If you want to see pictures of me, just go to my Twitter, DrX2112 at twitter.com. There's plenty of stuff that pops up on there.
All right.
Oh, my frozen image isn't even that flattering anymore.
Yeah, neither's mine, but whatever.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead here and do a bit of a screen share. It's going to say, yes, I'd like to proceed. And we're going to do a window here, and I'm just going to go ahead and bring this up and move us all to the side over here. So this is actually from my silly little notebook. So as soon as I read about this, I ran out and bought this from Amazon because, I don't know, I'm addicted to spending stupid amounts of money on Amazon. But anyway, it is a cool notebook, and in the back, it has, as soon as I can get to it, it has graph paper and it has hex paper.
Ooh.
So I thought that this would just be kind of really nice to go ahead and begin this with. just to kind of get that going. But this is the cover to the actual book. So it is a 5 week thing, and each week kind of gets a little bit more and more aggressive as you go. So the first week's kind of easy and fun sounding, and then as you look at the second week, you're like, wow, this is all like doubled of what I had to do. But I kind of want to read here Gary's step one before we talk about the first week and kind of get an idea. So, in Gary's article, he writes, step one is something you do in your head. Now, fantasy/swords and sorcery games need not have any fixed basis for the assumptions made by its referee. My own doesn't, except those which embrace the whole of fantasy. This sort of campaign can mix any and all of the various bases, which will be mentioned below, and then some regardless for what setting you opt. Keep it secret from your players, or else they can study your sources and become immediately too knowledgeable, thus removing the charm of uncertainty. Settings based upon the limits, if one can speak of fantasy limits, can be very interesting within themselves, providing the scope of the setting will allow the players relative free rein to their imaginations. And he goes in talking about some inspirations: Teutonic Norse mythology, Hyborian Age, Robert E. Howard, Fritz Lieber's Nuon, and so forth and so forth. So I kind of find that interesting, where Gygax is basically going, yeah, work on this world, but no, don't tell anyone else about it, because they're just going to go ahead and cheat. And then suddenly, I mean, those weren't his words, but that's kind of how I heard it in my head, where it's just
Sounds
like,
legit.
I guess very true. Because I remember back in the day, and Mike and Terry, and Pat, well, everyone might remember the whole, players should not read the DMG. That is like horrible. And if they read the monster manual, you then have to like bleach out their eyes and switch the monster manual, because like they now know what monsters do. And it's not so much anymore. I think in more modern D&D, it's encouraged to like read the 3 different books, but I still remember back in the day when it was pretty much verboten to do any of that other than read the player's handbook.
Yeah, we ignored those rules.
Well, also too, if you've has everyone here read the first edition AD&D player's handbook?
Yeah, it's what I mainly learned to play on.
All right. Well, the one thing that notice about that one book is that there's really no information in it. It tells you how to create a character, but it doesn't give you saving throws. It doesn't give you the combat matrix. It gives you spells, but that's about it. And I guess in to some degree, that's great if you're just the player who needs to know their spells and how to create a character. But combat's this mystery, and then you go into the Dungeon Master's Guide, and it's so interestingly laid out that you're spending hours trying to figure out what the combat matrix means and what saving throws are. So it wasn't particularly a very useful book. I think it wasn't until really second edition where they started saying, all right, well, here's all the rules you're going to need. And then obviously 3 and 3.5 and 4 definitely was like a very big mixture of rules and character generation. And then obviously 5th edition, pretty much you can run everything on the player's handbook. Like, honestly, the DMG is kind of like a helpful solution book, and sure, the monster manual's there, but you can also go online and Google most 5e monsters because they're there. So
I can speak for myself and say that I learned to play on the basic and advanced rules as a teenager. When I was in the Army, we played 1st edition, and then I basically didn't game until 5th edition was out, and I started gaming with you. So I skipped everything in between, missed it all.
And Catherine, you said that you mentioned 4th edition, which actually I always feel is the unsung hero of D&D. Like, I know a lot of people didn't like it, but it was its own game. And honestly, I think especially for new players, it was the coolest thing because I used to do D&D encounters at a game store back in the day, and I still remember just you handed out the pre-made little cards to everybody, and everyone pretty much picked up how to play the game within 5 minutes of explaining that you just take this number here, you roll this die here, and all your powers are pretty much laid out like right
Oh
here.
yeah. That's one really good thing about a fourth edition is that it's very easy to start and get into as long as you're like not. I played one that like started at 9th level and used every book ever printed and
Oh.
Dragon magazine stuff, and that was a headache.
Well, and I think also too, my biggest issue with fourth edition is that in other editions, you could literally just grab a piece of paper and write out your character, like, and without any having to reference anything, because you know what your 6 stats are. You know that you're going to add a bonus to this, or in fifth edition you add a proficiency. But the fourth edition power structure was so intricate that you couldn't just go, "Oh, I know this power, and I'm going to write it out on this piece of paper," with ease. It was more or less like, I got to reference this thing, and have your books near you. So that was one of the I think one of the things that just kind of was odd to me about fourth edition was that it wasn't something that you could just grab a piece of paper, write out everything, and you're ready to go. You kind of had to do a little bit of referencing in order to get that going. And character builders were far and few between. So it wasn't like now where you can just go on most things and it'll generate a character for you. But anyway.
I grew up on a 3.0 and like 3.5, and later on went to Pathfinder first edition, and that was all before like electronics became really popular or whatever. And I mean, when I was a kid, I didn't even have a computer, so I kind of just like hammered it out through trial and error and writing it out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Pat, what edition did you start with? Did you start with first?
Did I start with? No, I'm not that old.
Hey,
I honestly, my first exposure to D&D was the Temple of Elemental Evil computer game, whenever that was put out by Atari, and I was a big RPG fan. My first introduction to pen and paper, I was actually trying to figure this out. It might have been third edition. I know that I was a gun mage. I was a bouncer at a bar, and I know this is a very Vin Diesel origin story, but I was a bouncer at a 4 a.m. bar, and we would have to be at work at 10, and nobody would ever show up to the bar until 1, 2 in the morning, and we would just play D&D. And I don't know what version it was. I know that I was like a bard, but there was guns, but guns were very not they weren't very uncommon. This was probably 2005-ish, so whatever the version was that was out then.
2005 would have been
3.0?
3.5, I think.
Yeah, 3.5, because 3.0 actually came out in late 99.
Right.
And it lasted for 2 years, and then suddenly they're like, "Hey, all those books that you just bought, worthless. What? Here's a whole new set of books you can buy." So yeah, 2005 would have been 3.5.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned the Monster Manual, because that was the first book that I got when we had like the Christmas grab bag at the bar. Someone, one of my fellow players, bought me the Monster Manual, so I never got the feeling that was like sacred information that you weren't supposed to know. I could see, as far as like in game goes, unless you're a high level character, you're not going to know all of the attributes of these monsters. But if you've existed in the game world for a while, you would know what the deal with a ooze was, or a cobalt, whatever, like.
Yeah, no, 3.0 was interesting. I mean, honestly, I guess my sweet spot for D&D is second edition, because yes, Pat, I am old, and and played those. Well, actually, I started with oh my god, now we're just gonna sit here and show how
back in my day.
I started in 81. My grandfather bought me the Mulvey Cook basic box set from like KB Toy and Hobby. So and honestly, I didn't even know how to play it back then. I bought it and tried it and then threw it to the side. And it wasn't till I think 2-3 years later that my mom bought me the 3 core books for Christmas one year. And then I just started going, oh, that's how it works. But no, it's just, I don't know. The books were magical. Let's just put it that way. It was an exciting thing. And I think what really triggered it was watching, and this is even going to put me further back into the old man category, was watching the Rankin Bass Hobbit cartoon when it first came out, like in the late 70s. That's because I was just like, what's this Hobbit thing? And dwarves and orcs and goblins, and this is so cool. And then I found out about D&D, and I was like, all right, I'm pretty sold. Yeah, Mike, how about you? Are you first edition? Or are you not that old either?
Yeah, I'm one of the old guys. I started with the red box back 79 or 80, somewhere around there. I did the same thing. I didn't really quite get it. I was reading The Lord of the Rings at the time, and I kind of sort of got it, but I was like, I don't know what this is. And my brother's like, no, it's really cool. You get to play Legolas if you want to play Legolas. I'm like, oh, really? Okay, well, that sounds cool. And me and my brother, we got our friends to play, and one thing led to another, and that was it. The rest, as they say, is history.
Absolutely. So I think this challenge also really kind of brings back the early days for those who actually did this sort of thing, because like in the time when Mike and I started, there were some modules, but it was really they really just told you to grab paper and draw stuff. Like that was kind of the vibe. It wasn't until you started getting into like second edition with the splat books where it's like, hey, why create anything your own? We have 50 different worlds you can buy here, and they're all, horribly written. But
I got to say,
they had some cool ideas in them. They may have been poorly executed, but they did have some pretty neat ideas.
Like 90% of the D&D games that I've ever played have always been homebrew. I don't think I've ever sat down with a module and just went out of it cover to cover, unless I was doing like that Rick and Morty box set, or I was doing something very specific. By and large, when I play, I'm going to make up my own stuff. I mean, that's the whole point of D&D, isn't it? Is to create your own adventure. You're given this giant crayon box with all of these colors, and you can go anywhere and do anything. Why would you reduce it to just reading out of a book and doing like a step-by-step thing again? It just seems counterintuitive. I read them because I like it's a good place to steal material from. I mean, I use them as jumping off points, but I don't. It's very rare that I would actually run a campaign strictly out of a book.
Yeah,
when we were playing back in the 80s, we did use some of the layouts from adventures and maybe some of the dungeons from it, but it was all inserted into homebrewed worlds that we changed everything. It was all made up basically on the fly for the most part for me. Other people just detailed everything out they could, drew art, did their whole thing. It really ran the gamut.
Not to hog the mic, but just to throw one more anecdote in here that I think has value. So when I was at GaryCon a couple weeks ago, I ran the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles thing and had a great time, but also was like, why did I come to a gaming convention to run a game? I come here to play, not do work. Like, it defeated the whole purpose of it. It was very counterintuitive. And the game was a success. The people liked it. But after it was done, I said, I'm not going to do this anymore. The next day, I had a DCC game with Brendan LaSalle, and it was supposed to be like an experiment, right? And the experiment was that Brendan didn't show up with shit, and we improv the whole thing. He went around the circle, and everyone gave a fact about this city that we were in, right? And it was the whole 4 hours from start to finish was improv, and it was so amazing. I had such a good time that I walked out of that game and I said, I want to be that good. I want to do this again. And that's when I started putting the idea together for the Home Alone thing. I think that like there's a component of this that's improv, that as much as you want to write stuff down, like the magic of this game playing experience is really the collaborating with the players and having them, you guys are telling a story together, and when you take that out of it and you go by like this thing that we have to go by, you might as well just be playing sorry. That's the whole point of doing something different, is the feedback, is the collaboration between the people.
As a DM back in the day, doing this discovery style, one of my goals was to find what the players were wanting to get out of it and find ways to enhance what they were doing to make their experience better. It didn't mean that I gave them everything they wanted. Sometimes they failed spectacularly, but they had a blast when things went terribly, terribly wrong.
Oh, yeah. I started out, as I said, when I was like 7. And so I feel like my group had a very unique take on it, because we were all just kids. Like, we didn't have a grown-up teaching us. We didn't have anyone like commanding us. We were all like 7 to 10 years old, kind of stumbling through the 3rd and 3.5 edition books. And I remember I thought that the bestiary or the Monsternomicon was like almost like a race book that you could like play out everything in there. And luckily I didn't make my character too weird at first. I was just like a null barbarian. But yeah, I always thought that I was like, oh yeah, I could be an inevitable, right, guys? And it's like, oh yeah, totally.
But see, the thing is, you were actually playing in the spirit of the game, though, because even Gary writes in the like 0 edition game, like the three white books, the box set,
the chainmail books.
Yeah, like the ones that came after chainmail. So the first 3, was it Might and Magic, whatever. But Gary actually says that there's, if you want to play a dragon, you can go ahead and play a dragon. You just start off as a baby dragon and work your way up from there. So D&D has actually always been a game where you could play whatever you want, but just build rules around it. And that's so yeah, playing an old barbarian, wanting to play, I think that's amazing. Especially I feel bad now because my son Niall, who I taught to play when he was around 8, and I was kind of a little more harsh on him when he would just, because he was very into Harry Potter and Pokemon, and he just wanted to do all these weird things, and I was being very, very authoritarian. I can't even speak English tonight. You know what I'm trying to say. Anyway, I was just like, well, that's kind of nice, but it's elf, orc, dwarf, so it's so yeah, so it's kind
You're
of
harshing him, man. You're harshing him bad.
I know.
Yeah.
Harshing the mood.
That's the best part of playing with kids, is that they don't get hung up. Like they don't worry about looking stupid. They just say the craziest shit. And I play with kids a lot. I play with my kids. I have friends that ask me to go and DM for their kids and teach them how to play. And I say yes to everything. Going back to the improv thing, I live in Chicago and I'm a byproduct of Second City, like half the other people here. And the one thing they teach you is yes and. You don't say no when you're collaborating with people. You say yes and then you build off it. So when I was doing the Ninja Turtles game, one of my players who was a kid was like, well, I want to have, does Casey Jones have a skateboard? I was like, you tell me, does Casey Jones have a Casey Jones has a skateboard. Okay, well, let's come up with mechanics for it. Or they were going through the break room of the Foot Clan and they find sriracha. And I want to put, Raphael wanted to put sriracha on his sides. I'm like, well, realistically, if you put hot sauce on your sides and you stab someone with it, you're going to do like 1d4 damage, and just we'll come up with shit. And who cares? It's a game. You know what I mean? The whole point is to have fun. And if everyone's having fun, it's not for me to tell you what you can't do. It's for me to figure out a way for you to do what you want to do and have the dice be involved so that there's some kind of fair play and there's some element of chance.
Absolutely. And Mike, you've taught your son how to play as well, right?
Oh yeah, I did, and he's enjoyed it. He's actually we're wrapping up one of the canned adventures, but it's interesting because he has taught me a lot about, well, I don't want to say stuff that I've forgotten, but yeah, I guess that'd be the fair way of saying it. And to touch upon what was already said earlier is the spontaneity and the thinking outside of the box and the creativity. A lot of times I've noticed that, at least personal experience, my games sometimes get a little formulaic, And I think it's refreshing when someone else brings a new perspective in, and you allow that to come in, and you allow the improv to happen and the creativity. And he's been able to do that. He's been able to really do some very creative things with spells that I was like, oh, that's interesting. I haven't really thought about using it like that. That's neat. And instead of immediately going, no, that's not how the spell is supposed to work, I say, yeah, that's interesting. Let's see what happens, and let's build a framework around it to see how it works within the game. So it's been fun.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about the week 1 challenge, and then I want if Catherine would give her experience on what has gone on so far, and then we can just kind of digest that a bit. But so for week 1 is really simple. It's create a notebook. So as I showed you, I grabbed a notebook. I found one that was I didn't really need, but I bought anyway. And it's just something so I can write my notes in, right? Just to kind of jot down. You can go to a dollar store and buy a notebook. You don't have to like follow my lead and just spend stupid money. Develop your pitch. So write down 3 to 7 well-crafted bullet points that will both communicate and sell the world to your players. Each bullet should be concise and focused. A few clear sentences is plenty. Emphasize the most essential bits for establishing excitement, expectations, and tone. And then the last part of it is gather your sources of inspiration. So it's almost like writing Appendix N in your book. So you're going to go and just jot down what other books have inspired you, what TV shows inspired you, what makes that world tick. I don't joke because it's not really a joke, but my campaign setting for DCC that I published, Tales from the Fallen Empire, is actually based on a really cheesy sword and sorcery movie from the 80s called Warrior and the Sorceress with David Carradine. And honestly, I love that movie since binge watching it on Cinemax many, many, many years ago. And honestly, that when I finally started developing the world, I was like, wow, this is the world I want to develop. And so, yeah, so the book is actually, the world setting is based on a really cheesy Roger Corman movie from 1981 that starred David Carradine before he got really weird. Or I think maybe he was already really weird. But anyway, and those are things. Then then there's extra credit work on this one. So assemble a mood board, which I actually kind of started doing before this, which is, go to Pinterest, go somewhere that you can put up some pictures, Facebook, I mean, anywhere where you can make a wall and just take images and toss it up there and just kind of get that feeling, something that you can go back to when you're like going, I'm stuck on something. I've known actually people who will take magic cards that they have and basically do them Tarot style and put them out in front of them, and then pretty much grab some inspiration from the pictures that are on it. So there's many ways of doing a mood board. You don't have to do it digitally, but so those are the 3 things, and that's all in the first week, and that's pretty simple. I'll go into the following week in a second, but so Catherine, do you want to give us your experience since you are working on week 1?
Sure. So yeah, I found that week 1 was very fast and easy. Part of it was because I'd kind of already thought about a lot of this stuff because I'd been just kind of toying with my MMO idea for a while, and so I was like, okay, I know what I've grabbed inspiration from, and it was kind of then focusing more on the pitch and going like, what exactly do I want to do with my idea that will make it kind of special? And if you'd like, I could read out my points and stuff.
Yeah, that would be great. Just to give us an example, because I'm going to be delving into this fairly shortly. So
yeah, sure. And I mean, it's relatively quick. So for develop your pitch, I have the campaign is set in a sword and sorcery style theme park MMO. as in like World of Warcraft and to an extent Final Fantasy 14 to a degree. Like there's always like stuff to do. Players will have two characters, their player and their player's avatar. Their player is who their character is outside of the MMO and has their own stats, rules like game mechanics, while their avatar is their character inside the MMO and uses 4E standard rule set. That was an idea I got from games like Lancer and Icon, where they have like your mech, which is the main focus, and then your pilot, which is like the secondary, but still important character. It's a more lighthearted game. Players are not trapped in the MMO, and the MMO will not be a risk to their well-being, but they may face stressors of everyday life. The MMO will have various tropes and features that are often found in an MMO, such as jumping puzzles, dungeons, raid, PvE content, and PvP content, which for actual gameplay purposes is not PvP. Player death is not permanent, just like in an MMO, but it might set you back by transporting you to the nearest town or resetting progress on a raid boss, stuff like that. Will feature .hack style gates, which can teleport players all over the world, assuming they have the access key for the respective gate. Players can acquire access keys through quests, plot progression, literally MMO's plot progression, not like my plot progression, forums, and even word of mouth. This allows for a more flexible world in terms of setting and scope, as you can go into a portal and come out on the other end in like a completely different landscape than when you entered. The plan is to have it be somewhat sandboxy with actual level divides between areas. There is a main plot, but like in World of Warcraft and Guild Wars 2, it is optional content. There may also be a main plot in terms of something nefarious going on within the MMO that players can stop, but I haven't really decided on what that will be yet. And then my source of inspiration were .hack Quantum specifically, because the crux of this setting is based on ID, or I don't know why I said ID, .hack. And Quantum specifically is like a 3 OVA series within the .hack series that focuses both on the MMO and the weird stuff going on in the plot, but also on the characters' everyday lives. Another one was Sword Art Online Progressive, because that kind of delved into more of the like what things happen outside of the main characters and kind of other activities you can do. World of Warcraft was an obvious inspiration. Final Fantasy 14, Guild Wars 2. Cyberpunk 2077 has a thing called not 2077. Cyberpunk Red has a thing called Elfines Online, which is a very short little book that gives like an MMO style game using Cyberpunk Red rules that you use your Cyberpunk Red character for, and it's kind of like its own little like mini game almost. And then there's a manga that my friend sent me that I still need to read, but from what he's told me, it's really perfect for what I'm looking for, which is called ID Entity. And I haven't actually read the series, but have recommended me a lot. It's apparently a series set in an MMO that follows the players both in the game and out of it. Their biggest worries are life getting in the way, and instead of it being like a big, oh no, the big bad evil monster is going to murder my family, it's like, oh, I have homework, and so I have to leave.
So I have a question. So this, because the concept of having two characters, one being the avatar, one actually being the player character, I guess, in a sense. Now, is it does it switch in and out of world perspective within the RPG, or is it always kind of, or is it narrative of the player character through the avatar? Like, I'm just trying to get my head around, because
Right.
there was a series of books, and I know Artal Sorian, speaking of Cyberpunk Red, did a game on it back in the, I want to say early 90s, but the series I think was called Dream Park. And it was basically about this, I think the books had to do with the protagonist who goes into almost kind of like a I can't remember if it was a virtual reality world or whatever, but anyway, they put their mind into the body of a novel character.
Oh yeah.
And this is what but it kind of went back and forth in perspective, is that you knew that there was a living, breathing person on the other end who had these thoughts. However, it translated into the main character in the story, but that was the focus. So I'm just kind of curious, are you dividing attention between the two characters, or is it mainly the avatar with like commentary from the
It's kind of like, how do I describe this? Basically, you're playing the player who is playing the game. So like, the player has their own stats that aren't tied to 4th edition. I made like my own little system for that. And they have like their own life. Their focus is more on like the stressors of real life, and making rolls to see how the stressors of life might interfere with your gaming life. And then when they're plugged into the game, they don't really become the character, but they become, or like they're playing the character. And it's like, they won't be like, oh, I have become this person who has their own thoughts and feelings. They'll be just, this is my avatar. I go here to relax, kind of thing.
All right. No, I'm very interested to see how this eventually plays out as you develop it. I just because it's interesting to have that dual perspective in a character. Where I like, for myself, a traditional role player is that I'm so focused on the main character that I don't think about it. And then you have games like Villains and Vigilantes, which is another older game where you actually played yourself as a superhero, which
that's
was
cool.
Yeah, so you actually generate yourself, and then you tack on superpowers, which I just can't, like, personally, I can't picture myself as a superhero. Like,
Hey, I'm a creative dude, but that's even too much creative writing for me to handle.
Mary Sue squared.
Oh yeah. No, the idea was not to have like yourself in the game. It'd be like you make your player character who is someone else different from you. Because I know my players and my friends in general just don't really like putting themselves directly into the game.
yeah, well, yeah, because that can kind of get a little traumatic too, especially if it's a game that has high stakes. It's like,
Oh yeah.
I don't want to die in the game. That would kind of ruin my weekend. But so that's awesome. So definitely, I really want to see how this develops out. For those of us who are just starting, and Terry, I would like, if you want to do this would be awesome, because we could share notes. And Mike, I know that you're starting stuff, so maybe this might work for you. And I know, Pat, that's probably not your thing, but hey, this any feedback you want to give and such like that. But yeah, I mean, honestly, I want to think about the pitch, and my sources of inspiration for this, and that's something easily to write down. Creating a mood board, and then we can come back at some point and discuss how that went. Week 2 gets a little bit more serious, with basically you're getting hex paper, you're creating settlements, like a major settlement, 2 smaller settlements, terrain feature, a mysterious site, a dungeon entrance, and if you really want to push it, you can go ahead and create a random encounter table. So that's all like within the week 2 thing. But week 1 is just kind of pretty simple, where it's just like, hey, I kind of want to write down the notes of my world, gather the inspiration for that, and then ultimately, if you want to, create a mood board of pictures. So I think we have work cut out for us. But
you were talking earlier about generating story ideas, and I supported a Kickstarter that covers that.
Oh wow! So you just kind of put out cards, and it definitely.
I'll see if I can put it's basically you draw 5 cards, and when they're combined together, it sets up what the story idea is.
Neat.
So lots of combinations you can get out of that.
Yeah, it's very cool.
Very cool. So now I'm curious. I'm going to ask, since you are you are a published author. Um, when and because you do science fiction novels, so
I
in
do.
the world that you've created within your, is this sort of a method that you would use to kind of come up with a city or a town or a situation, or is there another like way of thinking when you start putting this together?
When I'm putting together a story, I start with a character. I want to have a character that grabs my attention. And then I place them in a situation or a world that I think is going to be interesting and enhances that. And once I have those two items together, then the story starts going forward from there. And I'm making up the details as I go and enhance as I need a city, I create a city. As I need portions of it, I create it. If I need a ship, I create that ship. I don't create anything as a writer ahead of time. I just wend my way through it in discovery right to get to the end of the book.
All
It's
right.
worked for 40 novels. I guess it works for me. That's basically how I DM'd as well. So it works for me.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of DMs who actually look at their adventuring party and then build the
Mhm.
adventures around the adventuring party instead of like creating a world. And well, I think one of the things that we see a lot nowadays with newer game masters is that they will actually write this intricate story to throw their players in, but don't really think that the players are going to do anything other than follow their story. And then they get upset when someone does the inevitable, well, I'm going this way. Wait, you can't go this way. My story isn't written for you to go that way. So
Wait,
I
that's illegal.
became I became a dungeon master that was a discovery dungeon master because my characters absolutely and utterly refused to do anything that was predictable. You had to figure out, they would figure out where they're going, and you're having to run and try to get in front of them and create the world that they are stumbling their way into because they are not going to follow your lead.
yeah, so actually I wanted to post a someone had written something here, if I can find it again. Oh, there we go. So Vampire, the Storyteller Guide. So I wanted to post this up here just for the fact that White Wolf products are actually kind of really good to draw information off of. I'm not saying like, hey, let's go raid White Wolf stuff, because some of it's kind of poorly written, but I want to say that a lot of this advice they give for in the at least early Vampire was amazing stuff. Like they really kind of cornered the market on writing more novel-esque stories. Then you're like, hey, we're in a dungeon and we're going to kill an orc and take its treasure. Vampire took it to that next level of actually creating political intrigue and things like that. So I just wanted to call that out because yes, I think White Wolf products are actually good. So let's go to topic 2 because I know we've been here for a while chatting about this, but I kind of wanted to make a little bit of a segment bumper for this, but I was lazy and I didn't have time today, so I couldn't really do it. But what I'm calling this segment is games you should be playing, and not in kind of a forceful way like or else or anything to that nature.
You will now begin playing the game.
Yes, but one of the things that I find with especially after the whole OGL debacle that happened, and Terry, you and I jumped on, I think, and bitched about it for a good amount of time.
No, I
But
sat and listened to you bitch for it over about 2 hours.
That sounds all right.
you know, I'm passionate. It's not bitching. It's passion. Everyone loves passion, but but one of the things that I wanted to get across is that there are so many other cool role-playing games out there, and some of them are D&D related. Like, Pat, I know you play DCC, Dungeon Crawl Classics, and that is an amazing game that's not D&D and has all kinds of cool bells and whistles that make the game really exciting. And other things that I've talked about in the previous stream, like RuneQuest, another older game that is not D&D, has an amazing world, and it's something that is definitely worth looking into. But so Raven Wolfgar, who I'll call out, he is someone else on Twitter that I follow. A really cool person, does a stream as well, reads tarot cards on their stream. Really, really, really cool person. Anyway, they had posted something about Zaibatsu and shown the cover and was talking about it and like they were going to do something with it. And of course, myself, who is someone who's like, ooh, a role playing game I never heard of before, I have to look this up and find out what it's about. And usually that follows with, oh my God, it's such a cool role playing game, I must buy a copy of it. So that's what kind of happened here. However, after reading the book, I was really blown away. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about it here. So Zaibatsu is I want to say, Gibson / Sterling style cyberpunk role-playing game. But it's not in the sense of, I would say it more equates to the early version of R. Talsorian's Cyberpunk 2013 than Cyberpunk Red or what Shadowrun has become. This game is definitely seeped in cyberpunk lore from the late 70s, early 80s, back when we had no idea that there was going to be wireless technology, back when we thought that, everyone's still going to be walking around with a huge computer strapped to their side in order to do net running, and they have to plug things into their necks and they have to hardwire themselves to things because, wait, what's this whole like connect wirelessly bullshit? This doesn't exist yet, or will not exist because we're in a dystopian future. But that's what Zaibatsu is pretty much steeped in. So there's no wireless technology here. Everything's hard coded. Everything is, you have to like jack in. It's kind of more of a cassette culture than it is digital culture.
I know somebody who would very much appreciate this book.
Please tell me that there's somebody with a rotary dial jack in.
Honestly, I don't know, but it almost sounds like this book would have it. And it's actually based on another world called Hostel, which is a science fiction game, but also seeped in that technology. So it's not, again, it's very old school dystopian science fiction where, things are, your computer has very little space in it. And just amazing stuff. But anyway, in this game, what you're doing is you're playing Japanese assassins, as it were. And the reason it's focused on Japan is if you think back to some of the earlier William Gibson cyberpunk, is that we had this idea in our head in the 80s that Japan was going to become the super corporate master of technology, and we were all end up speaking Japanese, and we would all live in this culture that was Japanese based. And I think Blade Runner was an excellent example of that feel, which was, everything in Blade Runner was pretty much very Asian or Japanese centric. And the same thing if you read things like even like Neuromancer, or read even the original Johnny Mnemonic short story. Again, it was very Japan centric. And this is what this book is. So you actually play in Tokyo. You play Japanese assassins. And like I said, it's incredibly just hardwired cyberpunk. And I think that's the one thing that I can definitely say to me was the huge selling point on it. So it uses a variation of Traveler. It's actually a Traveler clone, which someone early before the stream started pronounced it correctly. It's the
Cepheus.
Cepheus, thank you, because I was pronouncing it wrong. So anyway, it uses the Cepheus system, which is based on Traveler. So it's basically 2d6. You add a modifier, you're trying to get over an 8. And that's pretty much the rules. Like, there are some little intricacies with combat and how augmentation works, but honestly, it's a really like the rules are maybe not even a quarter of the beginning of the book. Like you already know how the rules work by page 20 something, and the rest of it's just really great source material and just things that you can put into the game. It's like a 200 and something page book. So it's pretty amazing when like maybe 20 pages of that is combat, like rules in general, and everything else is just kind of, just is source and usable things within the game. And then if you actually go and pick up the hostile game setting books, you can just add more and more to it. So I think that's just another like really cool feature of it. And Zoser Games, which I really never even heard of until last week, does some pretty amazing stuff. So I'm definitely going to say if you're looking for another game, it's $12 on Drive-Thru RPG for the PDF. If you want the hard copy of it, you can go to Lulu Publishing. I think it's like $21. And then if of course you search Lulu, you are always going to find some sort of weird coupon that makes it like $10 cheaper. So definitely do that. But I'm going to highly suggest, if you have the extra cash to pick it up, check it out. Especially if you like older cyberpunk. This is definitely something to take a look at. So. That is pretty much the end of my spiel. Does anyone have any just quick mentions of any games that we should be looking at over the next week or so? Not everyone speak at once. No, I'm just kidding.
I always recommend City of Mist. That one's one of my favorites. I've never gotten to play it, but it's one of my favorites to read and make characters for.
Is that powered by the Apocalypse, or is that another system?
I think it's powered by the Apocalypse. It was like one of the few kind of like rules light systems that I actually really liked, because I usually don't like those kind of systems.
Yeah, I recently saw a solo version of that on Drive-Thru, like I want to say a couple of days ago. So I'm familiar with the game. I don't own it, but I kind of dig. Actually, I probably have a collection of superhero games because I can never find the superhero game that I like. So I've played Mutants and Masterminds. Actually, Mike ran it for us. And let's see, Mutants and Masterminds. What else? I've played Icons, which actually to me is probably the sweet spot right now for superhero games for me. I don't know, the Marvel superheroes that was done with by Margaret Weiss Games. I can't remember the Cortex. Was just too loosey goosey for me because I like heavy combat in supers games. So if I throw a punch, I don't want to like narrate the punch. I definitely want to see damage and broken bones and people fly against walls and things like that. Yeah. So just quick story on superhero games though. DC Heroes. It was a game by Mayfair that came out in the early 90s. And it had this weird AP system. Like each character had a bunch of APs related to their strength and dexterity and all their stats and their superpowers. But every AP doubled on itself. So if you had someone with an AP2 and someone else had an AP6, they were something like, I don't know, several times stronger than you were, just basically by the way that this multiplier happened. And we were playing this game. We had some of the major DC characters in it. And I was NPC in Superman. And there was this fight going on. And there was a corrupt mayor. And it was in Gotham City. And I had Superman fly in and punch the mayor to knock him out, not realizing that Superman's AP strength was something like 40.
Ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the body of the mayor was 2.
Oh.
And by looking at that, realistically, Superman vaporized the mayor by punching.
I can't believe the mayor is dust.
More
Did
like
I do that?
But But anyway, that's just kind of an example of like I don't like it that visceral where Superman goes in and like vaporizes innocent people, but well, not really innocent people, but normies. But yeah, I like a little bit more structure to my Supers games. But
What system was that again?
DC Heroes by Mayfair. It's an
Okay, I need to
it's an
look that
older
up
it's an older
because
system. Mike, Terry, or Pat, any suggestions on things we might want to look at?
Well, I'm looking into Pathfinder Second Edition, just like you are right now. So that's the one that's on my mind. If I go back to anything else, it's going to be something old, something way old.
Like checkers? No, I'm just kidding.
No, role playing stuff back from the day, like Pendragon.
Oh wow, yeah, that's actually that's an amazing design actually for an RPG. Mike, I know you're doing some Pathfinder too. Anything else floating around in your?
No, just pretty much focused on Pathfinder right now. Just kind of exploring it, and yeah, that's it. That's really all I've got going on.
All right, and Pat, anything DCC? I know you mentioned.
Yeah, I'll name drop Morkborg just because no one else did yet. And it's starting to get increasingly popular, and there's tons of spin-offs now. But the original, I think, still has a lot of charm and value and great product design. Man, oh man. Like, I think it's worth picking up the book just to see the layout and the way that they structure that. It's a work of art in and of itself.
Oh, absolutely. And actually, if you go back into our channel, you can watch Pat, myself, and a few others in really bad death metal makeup and wigs doing
Mine was
doing
good. I don't say what you want about the rest of the guys, but I
yeah.
was a pretty convincing Paul Stanley. People actually
Uh,
thought you had Paul Stanley on your stream that night.
yeah, I mean, I had hair that night, so that was also kind of interesting. I went out and bought a wig, and my wife did some death metal makeup, and yeah, I still have that picture. I still show it around every once in a while, and I'm like, hey, this is. But anyway, York Borg is definitely a game to pick up. It's not. I mean, it's a little on the pricey side for an art. Well, not really. I guess it's like $30, $40, but still, it's an art book. It's like an art book and RPG all in one.
Right. And now there's Pirate Borg and there's Cyborg.
Yep. Oh, Cyborg's beautiful. I have a copy of Cyborg.
What? And then I was also going to mention. I think it's Mothership. Is that the? It's this. It's the same doomed type feel to it. Like the universe is dying and you only have so much time. It's collapsing, and it's kind of Morkborg in outer space.
Yeah,
And
that is Mothership. Who I kickstarted their latest thing because I didn't get a copy of the first version of it. So they're kickstarting a whole new box set of it, and it's been as usual with Kickstarter. It's like, oh look, there's a message from the company. It's like, oh, someone's sick and they can't do this, or the artist exploded, or the writer has temporary blindness or aphasia now and can't speak. So I mean, it's the Kickstarter excuse train, but hopefully I will see that box set at some point in my lifetime. So that will be really fun to read. But yeah, if you can find an older copy, or I think you can still get PDFs of the first edition of it, but it is actually really good, just despite the company's efforts of trying to put out another edition of it.
I know that Bundle of Holding has been doing some Borg stuff recently that are still live, I think, if people wanted to pick up electronic copies of the various Borg stuff.
Oh, okay. That's definitely good to know. Yeah, no, if you can pick it up, especially in a humble bundle or a bundle of holding, those are usually very amazing deals to walk away. Because right now there's a bunch of OSR stuff going on. Like Trollord Games had this huge thing. I know Shadowrun, and God, who else? There was also another big bundle of holding that was tempting, but I just basically passed on it. That was cool. And it was the Warhammer 40K RPG stuff. It came with almost everything. So that was another one. But I was like going, I have most of these, and honestly, when will I ever do a Warhammer 40K RPG like ever? So
Yeah.
Or it'll happen like after it's over, and I'll go, oh my god, I really love Warhammer 40K RPG, so let me go out and spend like $400 now on these PDFs. So yeah, that's just kind of my life. But anyway, I'm gonna go ahead. We're gonna wrap this up, but I'm just gonna go around one more time. If anyone has a shout out or anything they want to say in closing, and then we will be gone. So anyway, I don't know if I have really any shout outs other than I promise that I will get this channel back on its feet at some point when, school and work and other life just doesn't keep pounding me on the head. But Top Secret New World Order, pick it up. It is still in print. You can get it from SolarianGames.com. And we will have a new module that's coming out very soon. So keep an eye out for that. And Terry, anything you want to...
I'll pimp myself. Go to Amazon, look up Terry Mixon, buy a book.
I shall.
Short and sweet. Mike?
Nothing to say except keep the dice rolling and keep the juices flowing as far as creativity goes. Hope good luck with your world building, everybody.
All right. And Catherine?
I'll give myself a shout out and say you can follow me on Twitter, Epi the Tome. That's Epi _ the Tome, or the _ Tome. And yeah.
All right, cool. Well, I'm definitely gonna. Well, we follow
Don't
each
forget
other.
Pat. You can't see him, but he's still there.
Yeah, he's still there. He's right here.
I know. I was actually just saying that. I follow Catherine on Twitter, and definitely I will even follow more at this point because I'm very curious on the game that they're designing. So, just put.
Yeah, I need to share that more on Twitter. I haven't really done that.
And Pat, sorry, last but not least.
Right.
Saving the best for last.
Oh, too kind. Dr. X2112 at Twitter. You can find my link tree with the podcasts and the movies and everything else.
All right, awesome. So again, everyone, thank you for listening along, and we will get another thing set up just to kind of talk about week 2 and possibly another RPG that I've fallen in love with and can't live without that I can talk about. So anyway, have a good night, everybody, and we'll see you next time. And let's see, I think there's a...
Thank you for having me.
Oh, no problem. I think there's even a cool closeout thing that I'll kind of narrate through as... oh, here we go. And